Very excited to be here this afternoon. Not sure I want the graveyard shift, so if we can keep the energy up, that would be good. Um, we are very much galloping towards this final step. This is about enabling your team. Okay, so this is about getting the greatness out of them, but you're going to need motivation to get there, and that's why I want to talk about some of that this afternoon. For those who were noticing earlier, the competencies associated with this are about empowerment. It's about continuous support, which is a word that again came out this morning, but it's also about delegation. Okay, and it's proper delegation, it's not dumping. It's when you're really thinking about everything that you've got and how you can pass that on to your team, because you know that's development for them and gives you the space. So it's proper delegation is what we're talking in and what we're interested in. And like we've heard all of today, in fact, when we start working with clients, they start asking us to do all sorts of things. It might be about having high performance teams. It might be about specifics of how do I motivate, how do I delegate. They can come up with some specifics of what they're looking for. But really what they're wanting to know is how do I get more time? How do I get more time as a leader to do those things that I'm supposed to be doing as a leader? That task of leadership? And how do I enjoy that more rather than it be something that I just have to do? How can I get my employees to be more responsible for what they're doing as well, rather than moaning and blaming each other? So we know they want to do these things, and we believe that liberating leadership is the answer to that. And we take them through the process. You know this one so well by now, but I want to invite you to think about it slightly differently. Okay, a lot of what we've been talking about today is what you do at these stages for your teams. So how you give them feedback, for example. What I'd like you to do is think about when you're stood at this vantage point of enabling your team, or about to enter this stage of enabling your team, actually, what have you learned about yourself so far? Because it's that understanding of yourself you need to take with you for this next stage, because otherwise you're just turning up. We want you to be deliberate. Okay, so when you're looking at that visioning stage, from the vantage point of enabling, how does it seem? Did that vision seem big enough? Did it seem something that was out of touch, or did it seem something that was so easy? Actually, I'm not sure that was a vision. Can't believe I thought that was a vision at the time. It shows how much you've grown. There's learning in there, take it with you. Similarly, when you get to that mobilizing stage and you truly are managing poor performance and you're going out of your way to catch people doing things right, how did that feel for you as a leader? What's that really like? We want to get hold of that because that's learning for you. And when you're at that developing stage that Julia was talking about, what was it like to flex your muscles into those different stages? We're very good at coaching and mentoring. That's what we find through the program. But actually directing people and truly delegating, we kind of forget to do that. So learn about that for yourself and take that forward, because you're going to need that here. You're absolutely going to need it here. Okay. So the terminology of liberating leader, and I'm looking at Ali as I say it, was deliberately chosen. Deliberately chosen. It wasn't just a random word. They sound nice. Good alliteration, like that. It is absolutely deliberate, because it is about freeing up your teams. It's about making sure that you can get out of your own way for their brilliance, so that you can enable that creativity and innovation, etc., that we heard this morning, so compelling from Lewis. We need to set that free, that imagination. We need to set that free. So we want to be liberating leaders, but it's also liberating leadership. We want all of our teams to be leaders. And if we're going to face that challenge in 2050, then we need to get everybody to be leaders. We need them all to step up. So it's a very deliberate term, and it's actually quite a responsibility to get your teams to be set free in that way. When we started this morning, cast your mind back, when Amanda was asking you what it's like, quite a lot of you were able to describe what a bad boss is like. I'm guessing you can identify with what it's like being on the receiving end of that. It's not very pleasant, is it? But I was quite heartened that there were lots of good words. I'm guessing that a lot of you have experienced good leadership. You know what that looks like. I'm interested what it feels like. So if you're at this stage of feeling that you are a liberated leader, one that is really freeing up the ambition, the talents, the brilliance of your team, or you have done in the past, can you just raise your hand to give me a sense of how many there are in the room? A smattering, a few, and that's what we tend to find, is that often we haven't had the role model to know what this looks like. We don't know in which footsteps we're treading, and we don't always get there. Okay. But when you have got there, for those 10, 12 people that put their hands up, what's some of the words you would use to describe what it feels like to be a liberating leader in your terminology? What does it feel like for you? Like being Father Christmas. I love that. Who said that? Thank you, David. Like being Father Christmas. Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. You are giving them gifts all the time. What else is it like? Sorry, satisfying. Absolutely satisfying. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 It justifies what you do. They go on and you're happy because of what you've enabled to happen and just how brilliant they are, bluntly. You take pride in what they're doing. And that's what we want to get to. It's really worth getting to this stage because actually this is where it feels really good. We've talked about, some tough stuff today. This is where it really starts to feel good. This is where it's such a pleasure being a leader. And there are those of us that when we've got to that stage, we feel like dancing. It absolutely feels like we are a team working together. We know what the drum beat is. We're all jumping to it, but we're expressing ourselves to it. We're being ourselves. We are creating in that moment. And it feels very connected. That's a word that keeps coming back to me at the moment, certainly in the escaping this morning. That connectedness is so important. But it can also be quite a scary place to be because you can feel very alone. You can feel like you're just on your own because your team is brilliant. They're out there celebrating, and I'm not needed anymore. They don't need me. They're free. They're not needed. I've got very young children, but I keep talking to people who've got older children, are going off to university or leaving home, and they talk about that, but I'm not needed anymore. I'm not needed. But actually, there's a really important role for you going forwards, and that's what we want to talk about. So what we're wanting is to enable your teams, your individuals within your teams, to be the best version of themselves. Not mini yous, as lovely as you all are, is not mini yous. You don't want to carry that responsibility around. What you want is them to be them, and they're pretty good at doing that when they're given the opportunity to do it well. And what we find, and it's picking up on some of the words that we've talked about this afternoon, is that yes, they're really productive and their performance goes up. That's very exciting. And from an organisational perspective, of course, we want those things. But their confidence improves because actually they feel that they're not going to get told off or blamed when things don't quite go as they expect. They're going to get the learning from it, like we were hearing in the last stage in the developing piece. They have hope, they have optimism about what they can and will achieve together. They absolutely believe that they will get there. They take responsibility. They're no longer blaming each other because actually they know themselves very well and they are able to take responsibility for their own shortcomings. And they have engagement. They are enthused. They really want to work with you. And that's what we want to do, is we want to create people where they feel like that. Wouldn't that be brilliant to have a whole team of people who feel like that? Totally engaged. So in terms of talking about performance, I always use the performance triangle. People that know me, I'm always drawing triangles. It is about having a direction, absolutely knowing what it is that you need to do. In fact, we were talking over here earlier, and a lady was saying, it'd be really nice if my boss told me what I needed to do. A bit of explicitness would be nice, actually. A bit of clarity on expectation would be nice, actually. That bit goes wrong so often. We don't get that bit right. But we recognise the need to. We recognise the need to have a business plan, objectives, role descriptions, all those sorts of things. We also recognise the need to check in on people's skills and behaviours and how they prefer working as well, because that's the how, and it's the connection between those two bits that normally make up a conversation between two people in terms of how to get them performing really well. But we need to check in on motivation. We need to answer the question, why am I bothering? Why am I bothering? Because why am I bothered to go in that direction? What's in it for me? And why am I bothering to either learn those skills or put them into place? What's in it for me? And we talk about this stage throughout the programme. We don't definitely talk about it at stage 3 on the developing piece, but you've got to ramp it up now. We've really got to ramp it up because as leaders, as liberating leaders, you've got to have loads of fuel in the tank. That's what motivation is. It's your fuel, it's your energy that's going to keep you going. And as exciting as this stage is, it needs energy. Okay, so I want to just remind you or show you something by Simon Sinek. For those who know him, great talk on TED. And he talks about how we actually get it wrong when we're communicating as leaders. Because what we do is we tend to talk about what we do and how we do it. We don't connect with the why. And I think pretty much through everything that's been talked about today, we've been focusing on the why. And that's where you need to get to as leaders. You really need to understand for yourself first why you do what you do. Because when you do that and you have that connection in your heart, in your gut, you're able to communicate that to your team. And that's what makes you compelling. That's what makes people want to follow you because they really get what you're about. So when I was working with I was chief exec of a CCG, a clinical commissioning group, she didn't talk about, what we're doing is putting health and social care together and this is how we're doing it by talking to the agencies. That was kind of not what she needed to focus on. What she needed to focus on, and she did it brilliantly, was talking about her mum. And the fact that she suffered from dementia and a broken hip, those two things don't go very well together in a hospital. And they couldn't get her back out of the hospital for weeks because the social care wasn't connected. And she talked about her story in a very personal way. And that's what got that group of people, her employees, to understand why she does what she does and the difference that she's wanting to make and is making in that organisation. So going back to your vision is so important. And when we get the environment right, to keep going with Simon Sinek, humans will do remarkable things. I'm lucky enough that most of my work comes from people that I've worked with in other organisations. So it's all through referrals, pretty much. And so I see people in one organisation and I see them in another. And I'd like to say that most often they thrive in all of those organisations. But I have seen people who took a nosedive in one organisation because of the environment they were in and the boss they had. It was that piece that meant they weren't being the best of themselves. And yet take them out, put them in another organisation with the same resources around them, and they fly. Absolutely fly. You might recognise that in yourself, that there's certain environments that work well for you. And that's what leaders provide. Leaders provide that environment to create brilliance. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do, and that's what this stage certainly helps signpost you to. So we were talking about, where's Chester gone? There he is. Going outside, well done. Going outside of comfort zones. I had no idea he was doing that. We've got another one to really, build on that brilliantly. Is we're very aware that I've been doing lots of talking, and so what I've done is I've selected one of you to come up and talk to us. You don't know who you are yet. You're going to come up and talk for about 5 minutes about what you do. You're selected because you've got a nice yellow sticky on the back of your chair. You'll see it just where you're resting your back. So if you mind just looking, and when you find that, if you'd like to come up. So you've got a nice yellow sticky. It's there somewhere. No? Hurrah. So that's just trying to get you to think about, if I'm asking you to come up here, I'm so cruel. Some of you, I'm so cruel, and I do apologise. Some of you would have gone, I want the yellow sticker. You would have been, I want the yellow sticker. I can talk for 5 minutes, no problem. I'm in my comfort zone. Show me the stage, no problem. Some of you might have thought, that's a bit of a stretch. I think I can do it, but, don't want to not do it, so I'll do it. That's where your learning occurs. So you need to set up an environment for your teams where they're not in their comfort zone, not in their I can do this every day, no problem. You want them in their stretch zone. You don't want them in their panic zone. Some of you were definitely in panic zone there. I could see it on your face. I'm not looking, I'm not looking, I'm not looking, I'm not looking. So I apologise if that's where I sent you. But it's recognising that you need to know for your teams where their comfort zone is, where their stretch zone is, and how you make it safe for them to go into that place, because you want them to keep developing and keep moving into that place. You want them to be able to be comfortable with some of that moment, but not the panic. Please don't send them into panic. So thank you for playing. I'm also very aware that when you empower, which is one of the competencies here, when you empower your team, then you might be doing that through authority, but you might also be doing that through actually saying, you've got personal power. Go grab it. That's the most useful, isn't it? Most useful power is personal power. So you're giving power in a way through confidence, through reinforcement, through catching them do it right, whatever it might be. And they sort of give power back to you. At that point, get out of your own way. It's not about you. It's not about your ego. Send it back round to them. So as you see their power and their confidence grow, it's reflecting it back to them. And I have seen some leaders go and take that and think, aren't I good? But it's not. It's about your team. So it's keep reflecting that power back into your team. I've also seen permission as a word that comes up so many times. You need to give yourself permission as a leader to not have all the answers, to not always be right, to be a bit, how's this going to go? Because your team are never going to be brilliant if you're hovering over them. So it's giving yourself permission to step out. You need to give your team permission to step up. They might need to literally hear that from you. And your team need to have that reinforced in them. I've heard it several times from teams actually that I'm working with. They realise they need to give themselves permission to get into this space. And I think it comes from they don't want to take the leader's job. They feel worried they're doing what their leader is supposed to do, so they don't step up. Or they don't want to outdo their team members and they think that's some sort of rivalry. We don't want rivalry. There's no place for competition here. We need everybody. So this is about being able to all step up and give permission to everybody to do that. The next area is about, the word is responsibility. Again, this is, we've heard it several times. Responsibility is something we all want our employees, our team members to take, because it is such a burden if they're always coming to you. It might be, as Julia was saying, where all the problems come to you to sort out, to go and sort out the issues with another team member rather than them working it out together. You want to give them responsibility for it. And if you can remember this morning when Ali was talking, she took you through briefly the high challenge, high support model. You're remembering that? Really powerful. When you use high challenge and high support and you layer it on this model, you get responsibility being taken up by your teams. They want it. They want to be able to sort of hold that to themselves. It's really important for them. So let them do it. And so when they get it wrong occasionally, because they're human and like us, that's what happens, it's about making sure that you don't step in and say, don't worry, I'll sort it out or help you. It's about staying out and supporting, giving the continuous support. It's very easy to keep stepping in and to think, oh, I'm part of the team again, how exciting. It's not. It's actually, you are part of the team, but you're doing it from afar like a conductor would do to an orchestra. They know what they're doing. They absolutely know what they're doing. You wouldn't see a conductor go and suddenly pick up the violin and start playing that. So on your seats, I have given you a little pamphlet about motivational maps. So motivational maps is a fairly new product to the market, certainly into the corporate market. I'm very excited about it. It is a way of being able to define motivation, measure motivation, maximize motivation, and monitor it. Okay, and we were saying earlier that it's quite difficult to actually figure out what motivates somebody, and somebody down here said, well, they tell you one thing and then they actually realise you're being driven by something else. Absolutely. What motivational maps does is it gives you a shared language for saying this is what drives me. So when you've got a team that's gone through Insight or Myers-Briggs or whatever, They are used to sharing of themselves and being quite proud about their colours and being able to say, this is me, this is my personality, read it, this is me. Personality and personality preferences and insights are so useful, but they sort of take you so far, because what it doesn't do, it doesn't tell you what you're driven to doing. It tells you where you've come from and where you are. It doesn't tell you where you're going to. Whereas motivation layers on your personality and your preferences to tell you that information. So I'm going to just use some of this language to demonstrate a couple of examples with you. You don't need to know all of the jargon, but it's there if you are interested. So this is an example of somebody, again, I've changed the name as well, of an individual, we'll call her Nicola. She has these colours in terms of her insights profile. We're position 43. So she leads with that fiery red energy backed up by sunshine yellow and cool blue. Very successful, very dynamic, very much seen as somebody who's doing well in her job. She's been working with the same team for some time. They're at the enabling stage. She's quite thrusting, she's quite controlling, but in a good way. She knows what's happening. It's that cool blue kicking in to support her. But she feels a bit redundant, actually, in her role, and thinks that, there's lots of changes going on around me. I'm not quite sure what's next for me, because something's not quite right. So we looked at her motivations, and what she's motivated by is, first of all, she likes innovation. So she's a creator in MAPS terms. She likes doing things differently each time. She doesn't want to copy and paste what she's just done with her team and repeat it. She wants to grow and do something exciting and different each time. She's also driven by having purpose, making a difference. So she wants to know that she's making a difference. She loves the organisation she's working for. They make a difference. But what's she doing? And that's why she feels redundant. She doesn't see what she's doing because her team are all getting on with it by themselves now. And she's very commercial. She's actually thinking in terms of builder. Is this it in terms of my money? Am I not actually worth any more money now? Because I've kind of done this. I'm not sure what's next. So what we were able to do through taking her through motivational maps was get her to reconnect with what her drivers are, because her personality is unlikely to really change, and actually say what's important for you going forward. And what she's done is able to go and talk to her boss, who's also high performing within that organisation, to say, can I be part of the vision? Actually, this vision stuff we're doing, I want to be part of it. I want to help set what we're doing in our part of the directorate. So she's in there and she's creating it. She's helping set that vision. That ticks the first box. She realises it's not about her team saying, aren't you wonderful? She's not interested in that. It's more about what difference I feel I'm making. And so that's what she's doing with making a connection between the difference she's making and the results she's having. So she's working out how she needs to do that. And she's also making sure that she understands what's her next few career moves, either within that company or beyond, so that she can see what the steps need to be, rather than just be satisfied with the plaudits she gets where she is at the moment. And what she's been able to do with that is reconnect and re-energise. She realised she needed to start on her vision again. And that's the point. You get to step 4, enabling, and you start again. You need a bigger vision this time because you've done it. Let's go again. And that's what we're looking at. We then have Thomas. So Thomas, different organisation, funnily enough, same personality type. It isn't your personality type that drives your behaviour. It is your motivators that drive you forward, that give you the energy. So again, very dynamic individual, very successful, done a lot of work with him over the last couple of years, but he's recognition driven in the star type of way. He likes to dazzle and have reputation. He's purposeful. He likes to know that he's making a difference, but he also wants stability. Defender, really important to have stability. So he's done a lot of work with his team to get them to this enabling stage and give them the glory, not him, it's all about them. And he feels really proud of what he's done. And then they announce that he's at risk and his whole team's at risk and the whole of that layer in the organisation is at risk. They're going for a major reorg. Oh, stability, defender, kicks in. Old Thomas would have gone, right, that's it, fiery red, off I go, defend what is mine, convince them we need to keep what we have already. What he's done is he's recognised, you know what, this is right for the organisation. This is about me making sure that I'm preserving what is good about our reputation, because it is very good and it's very much in the spotlight at the moment, and making sure that we preserve what's good in our team, which is the camaraderie, the networking, the championing of what they do in their region. So he's recalibrated, if you like, his motivators about what he can do in that situation, and he's on fire, absolutely on fire. It's so exciting to talk to him earlier in the week. And what he said is, that in the past he'd have been very sad about what's happened and the fact that this is happening. And he's now said to his team, let's not be sad about that this is happening to us. Let's smile, because we happened. He's really proud of his team. And that's what you get. You get that connection, whether it's here or in your heart, that connection. We've used the word love a few times today, which sounds a bit, is that very businessy? Actually, when you're at this stage with your team, you do love them, because you've got trust, you've got rapport, you've got emotion happens at this stage. It is about real human kindness with each other. That's what we're very much looking at. So there are two examples of individuals. I also want to look at a team that I've been working with, again, a different organisation. Been working with them for about 2 years. That sounds a long time. Translated 8 days. So it's only 8 days. And what we've done with them is take them through the liberating leadership process with insights, with maps. When we first started working with them, these are their words, by the way, they were dire and awful, inward looking, a lot of backbiting, a lot of collusion going on. They weren't going to shout out somebody else's performance, because theirs wasn't that great either, actually. And you'd go along to a meeting and they just talked functionally about their bit and couldn't understand why those people were here. Okay. And they needed to be successful. They are responsible for a whole region and giving services within that region to a very important charity, very important cause. After about a year, they had gained in confidence, they had gained in optimism, and where they were at that point is saying, you know what, we're not a management team, we're a leadership team, and we are the regional leadership team for the North. They took that on, they embraced that leadership because they recognised that they could and they will. And what that's translated to is that they now problem solve outside the meetings. They are a team outside of those meetings, and they are able to innovate. They're coming up with some fabulous solutions with the agencies they work with, and they are setting the pace until finally they end up at this place that they're at now, about 2 years in, where they feel they've left large footprints for others to follow. They're about to get disbanded and split into two. And rather than sort of like, oh, that means we start again, doesn't it? That means we start again, doesn't it? That means that we can take our learning on to the next stage. And what they're doing responsibly is making sure that they're covering out all of their roles. So wherever the team lands up, they land up in a better place with all that learning. It's not going backwards, it's going forwards. So I hope you can see that actually what we've been talking about today isn't about getting to this final stage of enabling your team. It's about getting to that stage, getting the energy and the learning, and you showing up as a leader to be able to start again and go back to that vision so that you can see beyond the horizon. Thank you. So it is my absolute pleasure to be able to invite a lady onto the stage who I met through a previous client relationship. She was my client, and I have been so excited about the work that she has been able to do with that team. She's subsequently moved on. I'm still working with them. They are doing brilliantly because of you, I have to say. And she's moved on to a new organisation. And when I was asked to bring a speaker, it was obvious to bring Julia. So I'd like to introduce you to Julia Parnaby.
Well, thank you, Kate. Kind words of support there to you. You guys were lucky. I got the yellow sticker, so here I am. And when she first asked me to speak, I had two thoughts. The first one was, that sounds terrifying, so I thought I should do it. And the second one was, me? What did I do? And me, I don't know, that tells you more about me and my personality type than anything. But I guess, so I am an introvert. I'm not that comfortable up here. I am going to use my notes. I make no apology for it. But I want to sort of tell you the story of my last organisation, really. About 2 years ago, I took up a new role in a large health charity, and I was really excited. It was a big step up for me. It was a much bigger team than I'd been used to working with, 4 times as big as the team that I'd had. But I felt ready for it. I felt really confident and knowledgeable and like I knew my stuff. And then I arrived, and really quickly, people started describing my team to me as difficult, dysfunctional. Even senior leaders in the organisation told me that they were really hard to engage and work with. So you can imagine my heart kind of plummeted a little bit. But I quickly observed that there'd been no one in my position for about 9 months, and so the team were feeling really rudderless and like that they'd got no control over their destiny and that they'd had no one there to advocate for them. They couldn't really articulate why they were all in a department together. There were 5 teams. They couldn't really talk about what each other did, and I found this quite curious, really. There'd been a legacy of quite troubled relationships, from sort of hurt feelings that had been allowed to fester through to outright hostility, and there were some members of the team who really couldn't stand each other, frankly. But it really quickly became clear to me that this wasn't a bad team of people at all. They were all really knowledgeable and passionate about their individual areas of work. But they'd kind of given up. They'd decided that they needed saving. They needed someone to come in and be that leader to provide the coherence and congruence for them. And they described needing someone to help them be the bridge into the wider organisation, rather than believing that they themselves had exactly what they needed to do that work. So I guess what I need to do was to give them their mojo back and to kind of raise their sights and make them a tighter unit. And I think, again, stretch them out of their comfort zone. And let's face it, their comfort zone really wasn't that comfortable. But for me, it was tough because I'd started to struggle myself with other aspects of my role, separate from the team. And I wasn't really sure that I had it in me either. My own resilience and confidence flagged quite quickly. And for a few months, I felt really relentlessly anxious that I just wasn't good enough and that I was failing to make meaningful connections and that I couldn't sort of navigate the complexity of the organisation and the powerful personalities and cultural norms that existed. And at times I felt like everything that was my strength that colleagues in previous roles had valued didn't really have currency anymore, or just didn't work in this organisation. And I think I'd fallen into a trap with my team of thinking that by kind of proving my own worth, by trying to be super professional and happy and friendly and chatty and stuff, and inviting feedback on how I was doing, being really open and inviting that in itself was just going to unlock things. And it really wasn't, and I was completely naive to think that it could. So for me, the breakthrough, when it came, began in a really unexpected place. I recognised that I wasn't providing enough clarity to my team about what I expected from them, and I was trying to do everything myself. And I think that's because my strong sense of responsibility and my desire to kind of try and prove myself to an organisation that I didn't think really cared that much meant that I was just trying to do everything and take it all on. And if I'm honest, my irritation and my exasperation at the situation also kind of was driving me down a blind alley. So it was clear to me that the only way that change was going to happen was if I changed my approach and took control. And it was really hard for me to do that because I feel really hemmed in by being told what to do at work. So it felt really counterintuitive to me that someone being more directive and giving instructions would somehow then liberate them, and yet it did. So I found that I got much better results when I allocated actions rather than asking for volunteers to take on things, which I'd tried to do, thinking that was the nice collegiate way of working together. When I set deadlines and then I followed up and I made sure that those deadlines were absolute deadlines. And when I challenged unacceptable behaviours but explained why I was doing so. And then the most important thing that I did was to regularly set aside time and space so that we could work together to build a bit of shared purpose and to start to trust each other again and to make everyone feel that they were equal and important to their peers, because some people really didn't feel that they'd been treated as such. So I worked with Kate to kind of devise a series of away days, and I also organised some sessions myself, and we started to develop a common vocabulary. So we used Myers-Briggs, we used the 4-step leadership process, and we used motivational maps. And that allowed us to talk about the kind of team that we really wanted to be rather than the one that we'd become. We could talk about how we wanted other people to describe us, And then that was a platform to really honestly reflect on, were we being those things, and what were we seeing amongst ourselves and our wider teams. And again, there were times in these sessions when it really felt like pulling teeth. And I felt like I had a sea of blank faces that was sort of challenging my sense that this process would actually work. But whereas almost everything else in my role was making me feel full of doubt and anxiety, I really was absolutely unequivocal that this was work that we were going to do together and that we were going to make the future happen together. So I frequently had to flex my approach and take it back a step and adjust to the pace and the willingness of the team to engage. And I had to share some uncomfortable truths with them about them and about myself. I had to really lead from the front, which felt difficult at times. But in doing so, I thought that would provide the encouragement and the motivation to the team to do it. And worst of all, I had to do some telling off, which just seemed a really ridiculous thing to have to do. But unfortunately, I did. But it kind of worked. And so after a period of months, I sort of started to observe that the team were coming together. They were starting to open up and trust each other. And crucially, to raise their aspirations a bit. And once I got them to that stage, the crucial next step was to get out of their way. And I knew from the start that I didn't really want to stay in that organisation for very long, but I also felt a real responsibility that I couldn't leave and let them drift back to the state that I'd found them in. So I wanted them to have the resilience to prevent that from happening. And I knew that in order for that to happen, there'd have to be a strong support mechanism for each other. And, and have the determination to, this is the perils of relying on a bit of paper. I wanted them to have the desire and the confidence and the assertiveness to engage more boldly with the wider organisation. There was a likely storm coming, there was plans for a restructure, and there was a new corporate strategy in development, which was emergent, but almost entirely silent on the role of their teams, and I knew that that was making them really anxious. So we talked a lot about whether protecting and nurturing their teams was always the right thing to do, whether automatically jumping to support and defend them was the best way. And we explored, as we've heard about earlier, about how high challenge really has to go along with high support if you want to get your teams to the right place. And we talked a lot more about the behaviours we wanted to see, both in ourselves as individuals and as a management team, and then with our wider organisation. With our wider department. So the process of discussing and agreeing what these was actually really revealing, where we talked about our beliefs and personal values. And actually that process of creating them was just as useful as the list that we came up with in the end. And I didn't just want to work with my leadership team, I wanted to work with more junior staff. So I arranged a whole department away day and brought together a small working group of people from across the team to create and deliver that day with me. And I think they found that quite daunting. But I was sure that it was an opportunity to give them a chance to learn about each other's areas of work and just bring some injection of positivity and camaraderie. And afterwards, one of the junior team members said that it gives a real great sense of achievement to be able to pull off an event like this and see that others have enjoyed it too. And I think that was an important moment in unlocking what we were about. So I did it once and then I handed it over to another of my managers and let them get on with it. And the second day that they organised was way better than what I'd done, and I couldn't have been happier about that. So for us, using the liberating leadership process helped my management team to become a more kind of stretching and demanding team, looking at alternatives to the kind of supportive and generic way that they'd just kind of gone into being supportive without really questioning anything. Motivational maps that Kate's just described to us was really a helpful breakthrough in that, because it provided us with a framework to externalise and talk about what really mattered to us. And that helped us in turn strengthen our links and connections. So we realised we had a shared common purpose in wanting to work together to make a difference. We wanted to do work that had meaning and value. And you might assume that that would be a given working in a charity, but I think there'd clearly been issues of trust that hadn't allowed us to see that. And so this was really important in furthering our connections and strengthening us together as a team. And again, there was just a really interesting revelation when one of my team members realised that one of his team, who he'd found quite difficult to work with, she was engaged and motivated and wanted to do a really good job. She just expressed that in a really different way, and that didn't make her an irritation. It meant that she was just different. And he distinctly referred to that on multiple occasions. It clearly struck a chord with him and unlocked something in him to understand his own team better. So I think through a deliberate and planned approach to creating regular space with my line reports and with the wider department, and then insisting that they kept on working on it together. And we did that by pairing them up into what we called accountability pairs. We used the GROW model from coaching, where I made them sit down on a regular basis together and kind of set their own plans and then work together to make sure they were on track. And I think that really showed to them that this wasn't just some kind of leadership bingo or leadership fad, but that it came from a place of really strong regard for them, in the sense that I didn't want them to be in a terrible place. I wanted them to be in a good place. I wanted them to be free and have confidence to work together and build things, and that I really valued them. I think that did start to set them on a stronger footing for the future. So I don't really want to overclaim. I don't work in that organisation anymore. I left about 9 months ago. So I don't want to say there was a happy ever after. And this work, I think, isn't linear with a fixed end state. I think it is like a garden. It needs to be tended to keep it in the right direction. But I guess if you'll indulge me a little humble brag, the last year's staff survey showed a 93% positive feedback from the team for those managers. And that sort of knocked the performance of the wider organisation into a cocked hat. That was about 76%. So that's the thing I feel really proud of, actually. And when I left, I was hopeful that they'd continue this work and this development together, but I wasn't sure if they'd really valued it sufficiently to keep it going. But actually, I needn't have worried. Kate tells me that the team are transformed from when she first met them a couple of years ago. And they were really clear with her when I'd gone that they still wanted to carry on this work, and they readily took on the role of briefing her about how they wanted to focus and what they wanted to work on, which is something that I'd done before. When I met up with some of them recently, in passing almost, they told me, yeah, we had our GROW meetings yesterday. And I was really thrilled that this was just something they'd absorbed into their day-to-day work. It wasn't something that anyone was having to boss them about to do anymore. And the organisation's now gone through its restructure, and my old job has been split up into 3 senior roles, which are currently being advertised. And actually, one of my old team has just got in touch to let me know that he's going to apply for one of those roles, which I think is amazing, because he made really clear to me 18 months ago he wouldn't have touched it with a barge pole. So I think that's testament to the kind of confidence that they've got. And others decided to move on and to pursue her role of her passion of volunteering overseas. And that, again, I'm really happy that she did that. It was a conversation that we had together a year ago. And I'm pleased that she felt that she was able to make that decision. And another for whom it's her first managerial role, she continues to go from strength to strength in tackling performance issues in her team, which is something she'd never done before, and really growing her team and the ambition of them. So I guess I want to conclude by reflecting that perhaps it's how you make people feel and how easy you make it for them to fly that's the most sort of neglected aspect of leadership theory. And by that, as we've heard today, I don't mean that your role as a leader is to provide a happy and harmonious team where nothing difficult ever happens and everyone's really comfortable. I think your role is to get in there and to stretch them beyond where it feels comfortable. Not so that it's taut and brittle and about to snap, but in a way that builds connection and meaning and ambition, and that encourages curiosity, debate, and challenge as well. And I think in doing so, the sense of belief that you give people is what they'll remember of you long after your face and everything else you did is a distant memory. Thank you.